I've been working on some traditional Norwegian sweaters lately, and it's really got me thinking about other countries and their traditional knitting styles. Specifically, what is Australian traditional knitting? In this video, we're going to focus on garment patterns from the 20th century, including primary sources such as physical patterns and actual pieces, with a brief dip into some wool history. We're not going to discuss ethics and wool farming practices, which is its own conversation. Just a quick disclaimer, I am neither a primary source nor an expert on knitting. I'm just a very enthusiastic Australian knitter. There are many much more qualified people than I am, and you'll find a list of sources and resources down below. There's not one answer that immediately springs to mind. As I've asked people around me in my community, no one really has a definitive answer for me either. You might have one preconceived notion about what your version of traditional Australian knitting is, and it might be completely different to mine. So I've gone on a bit of a fact-finding mission and found some gems along the way that I thought I would share. And even if we don't get to the bottom of it in this video, it's food for thought. For us to examine what traditional Australian knitting is, we need to have a very brief look at Australian history through the lens of wool. I would firstly like to acknowledge the First Nations people of Lutruwita where I am today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. After about 65,000 years of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders living in Australia, British colonisation occurred in 1788 with the arrival of the First Fleet. With these ships came fat-tailed sheep from the island of Good Hope to be used for meat. After finding these sheep adapted incredibly well to the harsh and dry climate and seeing the promise of the abundant but undulating land, the first shipment of Spanish merino sheep arrived in 1797. Australia was the world's largest producer of wool in the early 1900s at 357 million kilograms, and still provides more than half of the world's merino wool. In 1807, the first commercial shipment of wool was sent back to England, and the wool industry boomed, with a couple of setbacks with the Federation drought and 2 world wars, up until the 1960s with the introduction of synthetic fibres.
It has to fight. All Australian wool is in this fight, but the merino has most to lose. The merino is the Australian aristocrat, the best of his kind, the backbone of the wool industry.
The very first video that I saw when researching this was a piece by ABC News from 1971, and it was the CWA Knitting Championship.
Tension increases as the 7 top knitters in the land prepare their needles for combat.
I wish that still existed. The CWA is the Country Women's Association, and every state and territory in Australia has a branch, and each state would crown their state champion, a little bit like sport, and then they would go to nationals. This piece is incredible, and I'm going to put the link in the description below because you absolutely should see this. It's only 4 minutes long. But there are some classic one-liners such as, "She taught herself to knit with 2 nails and a length of string," or referencing the controversial European knitting style from the WA contestant. When I think traditional Australian knitting, I'm not thinking back to settlers and Federation and 1900s. I'm thinking 1980s. I'm thinking dolman sleeve, crazy colours, Australiana, big kookaburras and koalas and wattles done in bobbles. I'm thinking Kath and Kim, and I'm also a little bit thinking cricket vest and bowls cardigan. But never in my life have I walked down the street and seen one of these mystical pieces that I associate with Australian knitting. So what do I see? I see a lot of 8-ply. For those from other countries, Australians refer to their yarn weights in ply. We have 4-ply, 8-ply, 10-ply, 12-ply, 5-ply if we're talking sport. And for our climate, generally what people would knit was 8-ply. I still have some cardigans that my grandmother knitted me in the 90s, and she started knitting in the 40s. What we generally see from those pieces are seamed garments, pieces that were knit flat, English style, and then those pieces were seamed together. Knitting in the round wasn't very common. It was done because we have a nation of immigrants, and all of those cultural norms were brought with them, but generally pieces were knit flat with straight needles. I found some really interesting books at the op shop. Some are from the 60s and 70s, some are from the 80s, and I thought that might be a bit of a walk down memory lane for some people and cultural exploration for others. Here are a couple I picked up just today in the op shop. This cost me a grand total of 70 cents. We've got a 1965 copy of the Women's Weekly, which was a magazine publication that still exists today. And in this book, we have some traditional Australian knitting patterns. The one on the cover, you've got an 8-ply garment that is a raglan style. Oh, someone has knit this. Whoever owned this book has knit this. And that writing, I recognize. That is the style of the day. To make up the jacket, press all parts except the single ribbing. Join sleeve and side seams in one line. Carefully join the mitered edge at neck edge of bands, then sew cast off edges of neck and front bands inside jacket against picked up seams. Neaten buttonholes, press all seams, sew on buttons. I have 2 cardigans from the 90s knit by my grandmother, who would have been following very similar instructions here, and they are the same. We have raglan style. This is a different button band that was sewn on, and it's all seamed together beautifully. Go grandma. Very, very neat. But this is an 8-ply. This definitely has an element of acrylic to it, but it also has a component of wool. This is another cardigan. Yep. Just fold over where my mum puffy painted my last name. Anyone else's mum do that? This one has a bit more drape. It still has the acrylic in it, but it's 8-ply button band. Very neatly sewn down by my grandma, but done in pieces. Here is a sleeve. The sleeves were also seamed. You can see where the increases are. It's definitely seamed. Has lovely cable details down the sleeves. Look at that. So proud of you, grandma. And this one is a set in sleeve. It's not a raglan. It would have been knit bottom up and then cast off. The button band was knit in a left and a right side and then seamed at the top. So that was generally the fashion. I see a lot of older gentlemen walking down the street wearing all over moss stitch or all over texture jumpers in mossy green shades or browns or navies. Today we are doing one of my very favorite things to do, which is look through my vintage patterns. I have a bit of a stash right here. Anytime that I go into an op shop, I just feel compelled to check the knitting haberdashery section. Most op shops will have one, and I love just rifling through the bins and finding gems. I don't currently have any plans to knit any of them, but I think that's going to change because I'm feeling very inspired. The slightly annoying thing about all of these vintage patterns is that nowhere in them, apart from this one here, is there a date. So I have no idea when these were published. I have no idea when these were written. So I'm going to make some educated guesses based on the hair and makeup and the styling and the quality of the photos. For example, this one, you can tell that it's been colorized, and the images inside, the image on the front, you can see there's a dude smoking on it. So we know that it's of a particular time based on the way it's colorized and the fonts that are being used. A lot of them have numbers on them, like this one's 508, and you think, oh, maybe that's a catalog. I have another one that's 103, which looks like it's very 60s, maybe in a very similar vintage, but that's 103, that's 508. I've got another one that is 961 that looks like it's from the late 60s. And then I've got this one, which is definitely 90s, and it's 804. I don't know. I am not doing any of this cataloguing stuff. I don't know how it works. If you do know how it works, like if you worked for patterns back in the day, maybe let us know below. Okay, where are we going to start? Maybe this gem here, where we have a pattern book for men's and women's raglan style jumpers, and they are knit in a patterned wool called Bluebell. And there are a couple of other patterns I've got that have Bluebell in it as well. Bluebell is a crepe and it's patternized. Interesting. Bluebell, a pure wool yarn with a springy twist that gives an immaculate finish. Pure joy to knit, Bluebell is patternized to resist shrinking to keep its shape. It also has patterns mohair and patterns moonbeam. Oh, that is full mohair. Wow, here mohair adds swagger to the Raglan Pullover. It's blended of mohair and wool plus 6% nylon for resistance to stretching. A luxurious alternative is Patterns Moonbeam, a mohair and wool yarn with 19% shimmering nylon for added richness and luster. Okay, so this one has to be after the 60s because they're talking about adding nylon to wool, which wasn't done prior to that. And we can also tell we've got some saucy little photos on it, very suggestive. That wouldn't have really flown by prior to the 60s. So the yarn weight is a 4-ply, and it's saying it's patternized, resist shrinking, and to keep its original shape. So they're obviously doing some kind of chemical treatment to it, maybe like a superwash kind of treatment. What I'm noticing is these patterns are not telling me how to make up the garment at the end. It's very bare bones. It's got a gauge whether you're a loose knitter, an average knitter, or a tight knitter. So if you're a loose knitter, you need 1 pair each of size 11 and 13 needles, average 10 and 12, and tight are 9 and 11. So instead of changing the stitch counts, they're telling you to change your needles and what you're going to need if you are average, tight, or loose. But what I am noticing is it's simply broken up into sections, and it's not telling me what to do with them. It's got the pullover with V-neck, the front, the back, and the sleeves. Shaping is very simple. You're casting off in a stair step. We've got 5 sizes. We've got A, B, C, D, and E. Size A is a 32-inch bust, and size E is a 44-inch bust. And the garment measures 46 inches, so it's 2 inches of positive ease. And that's consistent on all of them. So yeah, it's not telling me how to construct the garment. It's telling me how to knit the pieces, and then you got to figure it out. And that's consistent all the way through. Oh, saucy, saucy. Look, we're in the library. I could just pour over these all day. It's so fascinating. Oh, there's one that says to make up. With a slightly damp cloth and warm iron, press lightly. Using a flat seam for ribbing and a fine backstitch seam for other seams, sew up side and sleeve seams. Fold collar to right side, finally press all seams. So we're not wet blocking, we're steam blocking. So we had garments with 2 inches of positive ease at the maximum. Everything's kind of true to size. This is a beautiful one. I am noticing throughout that everything is very pretty. Everything's very beautiful. We're having lots of pinks and lemons and light blues. There's no brown. There's no dark mossy hunter greens. Berry tones. So if we got pinks and whites. Back to this one. There are a few different styles of jumper in here. We've got folded over turtlenecks, V-necks, crew necks. We've got collared cardigans. They look really lovely. Look at this one. And I suppose that's the one from the back. Yeah, here it is in colour. We have the exact same makeup instructions with the slightly damp cloth and warm iron. Jet and Skull, husky quick knitting casual yarns that are great for all informal and sporty garments. Both are patternized to not only resist shrinking, but to keep your hand knits soft and in shape. Here we go, you got Bluebell again, pure joy to knit. I am not noticing anything oversized, even the mock neck folded over turtleneck style garments are close fitting. Everything is a set in sleeve in this book by the looks of it. I haven't seen a single drop shoulder. There are no raglans that I can see. Even the v-neck, everything is a set in sleeve. Everything is either quite high or a modest V. This lady even has a little scarf. Oh, look at that collar. How beautiful. The details in this, the way that this yarn is knitting up, the bottom ribbing and the cuff ribbing almost looks like teeny tiny wavy cables. It's just darling. It's telling me Jet or Skull cardigan, opposite. So this is this the one pattern for all fall garments? I think so. We've got 6 sizes now, A, B, C, D, E, and F, from 35 inches to 45 inches. You can do a high or medium buttoning with collar or without collar. So it's a very versatile pattern. So a size C would fit a 36-inch bust, and it will measure 39 inches. So 3 inches of positive ease. It's telling me attention, 8.5 stitches to 2 inches. 2 inches, not 4 inches. So if we double that, 8.5, so 17 stitches to 4 inches. So worsted. It does look quite, what they call it, husky. There's Skull and Jet. But they're not knitting it in a very oversized fashion. They've got those 3 inches of positive ease. Here are the men's pattern book. This is even more bare bones. Okay, so Beehive is fingering. It's 3 ply, so a light fingering. That didn't explain in the other one. So this Beehive yarn is 3 ply. I did see on the Bendigo Woolen Mills website that they're phasing out their 3 ply wool. So if you are a vintage pattern knitter, maybe you need to jump on that sale and see what you can get, if they've got any left. But you could also be clever and use a 4 ply and adjust your needles, and I'm presuming that's what a lot of people in these books had to do, because for this pattern there are 3 sizes, A, B and C, from 35 inches for size A, then 38 and 41. So quite different in the inches given for each size. Oh, there's some beautiful garments in here. Ooh, this is a typical 60s cricket cardigan. Check it. So he's got a cricket bat under his arm, and it's saying in the instructions here you've got club straps down the bottom, so you can change the colours of these depending on what colour your club is. That is the typical cricket style cardigan. The one on the back has this really cool collar and a pocket, and I mean, I could see something like that being applicable to styles today. This one here, we've got colour work bands across, and it's in a set in sleeve style as well. It has a yarn suggestion on the front. We're using 3 ply and 4 ply only, so nothing over a 4 ply. Another one which has some kids knits in it. We have some Raglan style cardigans. These are very, very beautiful. Look at this lace work. And on the front, the buttons that they've used are very elegant and feminine and girly. We've got little pearls for the girl and gold ones for the female version. There's no oversize. There's no drop shoulders. I am so thankful for YouTube tutorials and websites that step you through instructions like this very, very carefully and clearly. The instructions on how to do things are very much assuming that you are a knitter and you are a talented, clever knitter, or that you have someone to go and be able to ask. Moving on to different years, we've got these ones which I feel are more 90s. Got this kids one. Check out this kid on the back. Look at the Scotty! Very cute little zip. We've got this really lovely raglan with a broken rib style pattern all over it. There's just some really sweet things in here. I'm wondering how they do this. Okay, we've got some charts. It goes over 2.5 pages. Has 4 sizes. Front, 3.25mm needles. Okay, so we've swapped our needle language. Instead of these 11s and 13s, we've got a mil, which is nice. I can understand that a little bit more without going through and converting it. Note, when changing colours in the middle of a row, twist the colour to be used on the wrong side, underneath and to the right of the colour just used. See diagram on page 28. Picture knitting using the winding yarn method. This is a method of knitting in motifs which avoids the extra bulk of ferrule. When changing colours in the middle of a row, twist the colour to be used on the wrong side, underneath and to the right of the colour just used. See diagram. As you begin each colour, give a gentle tug to even up loose stitches. So this is intarsia. It is necessary to use a separate quantity of yarn for each section of colour. To minimise tangles, wind small amounts of yarn onto Susan Bates yarn bobs. Unwind only enough yarn to knit required stitches, keeping bob close to work. And there's a bob. The colour chart looks crazy. It's 80 rows and it's giving you a starting point for sizes 1, 2, 3, 4, but it doesn't have a stitch row written in. So if it were me, I'd be writing in the numbers. And it's also suggested that you colour it in. It's insane. I mean, here's half of it, just in case it's still in copyright or something. That's slightly daunting. Okay, I'm using intarsia. This book I actually picked up because some of the styles were very reminiscent of petite knit patterns. So I was thinking about knitting the Dagmar and I was thinking about knitting the Jenny jacket, and I noticed that this book, when I looked through it, had some very similar texture patterns in it. So for example, there's our front one. And we've got these honeycomb panels here. And everything's very, we're not completely figure hugging, but we're not oversized and baggy. And then this one here, we've got smocking stitch. We're using an 8-ply, and then we're also using a 12-ply New Yorker. Do not iron. Okay. Again, everything's very bare boned. You're expected to know what to do. This one must have been published a little bit later because we actually have a diagram on how to seam, where previously we didn't have, in these earlier versions, even how to seam it or use that fine back seam that they were talking about. So here we've got a running stitch seam. This is a quicker and easier method than back stitch, yet gives the same neat appearance on the right side of the garment. So it's the most detail that I've seen in one of these pattern books that I've got here. And it has a diagram. There you go. There's our little diagram. Photographed on location at Toorak Jungles, outdoor, indoor and exotic plants in Victoria. Oh, we've got the horseshoe cable running down this jacket here and some moss stitch. So we're getting more and more texture in these garments. In the earlier versions it was very streamlined. This me and my husband at Bunnings. Can we get this plant? Where are we putting it? An interesting chunky vest. And then just for fun, I have this one, which I'm thinking is very 2000s, and it's Cleckheaton. I very much think that we are in the 2000s now. Have we got a date? You're saying all of this copyright stuff, but there's no dates. You've got phone numbers, addresses, websites. I mean, there's a bit of a data, isn't there? There's a website. So this is post the internet, and we've got much more detailed patterns. We have a whole page where we're going row by row. This looks more like a pattern that I would be knitting from today. We've got needles in millimeters. We've got next row, we've got a foundation row. We've got beginning the pattern. We've still got the making up section, so this one's still flat, but it is very detailed. It's got every single row written out, whereas previously we didn't have that. And we've got cables. So this Aran cardigan that we've got from the front cover here, not only do we have the instructions, but we have a chart. I see my first drop shoulders. I had not seen any drop shoulders previously. We've got a slightly more relaxed fit going on, if we see here. So the times are changing in the 2000s. Look, I'm just guessing we're in the 2000s because we've got hair gel going on. The other thing that I think of when I think of Australian traditional knitting is 80s.
Very specific cultural moment.
I have about 40 people knitting for me now, who then take it home.
The jumper, Glynis. This was worn by Diana, the Princess of Wales.
Here is a book that I picked up at the op shop, which is called The Australian Knitting Collection. An exclusive designer collection of Australiana knitting patterns, specially produced by Softly. Who's Softly? Oh, it's Tasmanian. That's Waverley Woolen Mill in 1984. How cool. It goes through the care of wool to start with. Oh, Softly, the company, the washing product company. Oh, interesting. Washing powders approved by the Australian Wool Corporation, such as Softly, should be used for woolen garments. So this was for a laundry company. Okay, the very first pattern we have is this one, which is the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge with iconic 80s hair, kanga sweater, koala sweater, Foster's cardigan with a Foster's on the back. Win up to $1,000 cash. Just design your own garment featuring something uniquely Australian. There are so many things to choose from, like sheep, the Opera House, koalas, Ayers Rock and wildflowers, or Ned Kelly, the outback, the beach, our flag, Aboriginal art, or wild animals, just to give you a few starters. For reference, it is not kosher to use Aboriginal art unless you are actually First Nations and it is your culture, or you have received express permission and paid for the rights to use such images. Why are we walking around with this on us? I'm really curious to know if anyone watching has seen these garments, and wow, we got a swaggy. This is a swagman. This is what I was thinking that I would start to see. Check this one out. Vegemite, product of Australia. Then we've got wattle products, a koala tea cozy. I have another gem, pardon the incoming pun, which is by Gemmell. This is another definitely 80s book featuring more Australiana kind of designs. In this book, we have a lot of knit flat and seamed garments. This one here, where we're starting to get lots of different competing colors, design elements like chevrons and abstract shapes. We're still influenced by Australian things. Here are some waratahs, which are an Australian wildflower. Cabled twister, where we've got some insane dolman sleeves. We've got black cockatoo, featuring waratahs and kangaroos, and possibly some inspiration from Aboriginal art with the colour scheme and the patterns. Also has some eucalyptus leaves on it. When we think Australian knits and we think 80s knits, one brand does spring to mind for a lot of Australians. I just have to get that image of Kath saying Coogee out of my head. Was very influential and is what a lot of Australians think of when we think Aussie 80s sweater, or jumper is what we would call it. So yeah, when most people think of Australian knitwear these days, we are turning to pop culture and how it's represented, such as in Kath and Kim with her gumnut baby earrings, but also her matching coordinating. Another way is through colour and taking inspiration from our flora and fauna. A lot of contemporary Australian designers have taken inspiration from nature, such as through lacework that is reminiscent of Australian wildflowers, through colourwork, It's about a week later now, and I've had a very special book come into the library which I placed on reserve. It's been really exciting researching all of the vintage and traditional Australian knitting pieces, but I've also felt quite apprehensive about sharing it because I'm in my 30s, I don't have 5 decades of knitting experience, I haven't done a course in knitting. I'll just keep listing all the things that I can't do. I am very enthusiastic about knitting. I love it, I appreciate it. I get so much enjoyment out of researching knitting as well as knitting itself. But I've wanted to lay out the facts and not just put in my opinions and my feedback on things. So, I have this book. This book has been done by the National Library of Australia, and in it are 25 classic patterns for modern knitters. What they have done is gathered vintage patterns. So this book not only outlines 25 vintage patterns, but they've also graded them for larger and smaller sizes, retested them, and provided yarn substitutions, because quite a lot of vintage yarn it's not really comparable to modern yarn. There's a lot of 3-ply, which we don't really buy anywhere anymore, and a few different construction techniques. I'm thinking like the crepe yarn that we looked at, the bluebell. Oh, that's handy. A knitting needle conversions chart. So we were talking about the 11s and 13s. Oh, that makes sense. So knitting needles were numbered by their gauge or diameter, measured as if it were wire. So we looked at an 11 and 13. 11 is a 3mm, or doesn't say in US, and 13 is a 2.25 or a US size 1. It's broken up into different sections. We've got women's, men's and children's knits. Let's see what they think about women's knits. They tended to focus on practicality and frugality, as well as style. One of the interesting features of the knitting patterns for women is the fact they were not as size inclusive. Well, we clocked that, didn't we? This is partly because homemakers were expected to be skilled knitters who knew how to make the adjustments required to make a garment in the size desired. It also reflects in some ways that women's magazine and other publications focused on the ideal home, the ideal housewife, the ideal face, and the ideal figure. And it's outlining things like figure hugging knits, cute little collars, short sleeves, emphasizing femininity and girlishness. Okay, so we gathered that from the vintage patterns the other day. Okay, we've got little collars going on. We've got a piece on wool in Australia talking about British short wool breeds that also produced good meat. Very important. And I think a lot of people in homesteading are finding that with their animals, like with chooks, you have good layers and chooks that are also good for meat. Same with sheep. Being frugal, working with what you've got and making it work for everything it's got. Lots of figure hugging outfits, maximum 1 inch of positive ease. Lots of collars. I'm not going to share too much from this book because it is a very new publication. In Australia you can purchase this from Booktopia, and I actually got this out of the library, so I think our library had 7 copies of it, so you could also try that. We've also got commentary on menswear, divided into 2 categories, business and sport. Cricketing flannels and vests were suitable casual attire for all sorts of manly activities such as tennis, golf, fishing and cycling. And talking about they wore 3-piece suits in the 30s and 40s. If you only wore a jumper, you wouldn't be considered properly dressed. Robert. We've got, here is the right sweater for the cricketer, golfer and tennis player. I would highly recommend giving this one a read if you're looking for further information on traditional Australian knits. I would love to know what you think traditional Australian knitwear is, and if you have any gems rattling around in your cupboards, if you have a Coogee and you think that that is the quintessential Australian knitwear, or if you have pieces from the 30s and 40s that you think is traditional Australian knitwear. I think for me, I always think of Kath and Kim, a bowls cardigan, like white with a bit of a cable on it, and a cricket vest. But you might have something completely different that you think of. And there may be some really glaringly obvious things that I've forgotten to talk about in this video, and I would love to know about it. I would love to know if you have a completely different view of what Australian knitting is. I don't think I'll be knitting any of these Australiana 80s collections, but you never know. Maybe I'll feel inspired to knit a cockatoo jumper. Although that Waratah one was cute. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.